I am Autodesk's Senior Territory Sales Manager for ANZ, the AAC market, and by the way, I can't see any of you, so hopefully I'm not making a fool out of myself. We're very happy to support AMC and the BIM MEPOs for the last 5 or 6 or 7, 8 years. I think we're doing the panel for the last 3 years. So I'm looking forward to doing another one. And clearly we have a lot of industry leaders on the panel. So I will start by getting everyone introducing themselves, please. So you guys got microphones. So Malcolm, go ahead.
So you may remember I was up just an hour or so ago. Name's Malcolm Foort, the Innovation Director at Zuuse. So a software company that's focused on taking BIM into FM and delivering outcomes for asset owners.
I don't have a microphone, but I think you can hear me. Yeah. Okay, this is Cesare. Everybody call me Cesare, Cesare from around the world, but the real way to say it is Cesare. I'm from Italy, and I'm working from COWI, which is a very small consultant company in Denmark. And I find out that there's no Australian branch for COWI. I just realized that, but I'm the BIM Technical Specialist Implementation in COWI. Thank you.
You can keep that microphone.
Shane Berger from Bagot. It's an international design firm. Many of you in Australia would have already worked with us in some sort of capacity. Of course, we've been around since the mid-1800s, starting off in Adelaide, but we're spread around about 14 offices worldwide. My focus is I lead as our Director of Technical Innovation, focusing on process innovations within the company, specifically the application of technology to how we design and deliver our projects, and then further, more recently, into technology within the built environment.
Tyler Goss, breaker of AV systems.
It's simple.
Doug Moore, President of McKinstry, MEP, Contractor, Energy Services, Facility Management in the U.S.
Thank you, gents, and welcome to the panel. So I've got a few questions for you, and hopefully that will just initiate a discussion, and everyone in the audience will get something out of it. So I will start with Doug.
Okay.
Doug, you've been in the industry for over 30 years. Can you?
Yes.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Could you share with us how you saw the industry change over the last 30 years? And also, do you believe that we are actually accepting change fast enough to cope with the demands?
Okay, so how's the industry changed? So I actually started with film lead on a drafting table, and today certainly that's automated work, but it's basically doing the same job. So we don't change a lot, and I think and I mentioned this, we come from a business cycle of sort of 10 years, and we have not yet grappled with the idea of sort of 1 to 2 year business cycle in terms of adopting technology and change. So as an industry, we don't like to change. So in my journey at McKinstry, we're still trying to figure out how to be a manufacturer as a design builder, and that represents change. And a lot of our staff have a tough time with it.
Okay. Now, I'm going to keep referring to what we call a design exchange. It's an event we had last night with some of the speakers. 3 of the panel members were in attendance. It's basically a round table discussion where industry leaders discuss some pressing issues in the industry. So if you hear me referring to a discussion we had last night, this is what I'm referring to. So I will refer again to Doug. Doug, yesterday you were pretty adamant that vendors and the industry in general needs to combine manufacturing and construction. Why were you so strong about that?
So we use a lot of human energy to figure out design intent through a buildable process, and the manufacturing industry solved that 30 years ago. So BIM has enabled for us the ability to unlock and act like a manufacturer in a supply chain, even though it's got custom dimensions. And so our industry is trying to solve what has been solved, and we're trying to solve it ourselves. And others have already solved it and could just give it to us, and we could save a lot of time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's really just to increase efficiency of the whole industry.
Yeah,
hopefully.
yeah.
So-
I don't have that many years left, and I want to actually see some of this come to fruition.
Hopefully you will. Mr. Goss,
Yes.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, I'm very good. Tyler, the make or break of any process are the people involved and the change management process that we put in place. I note in your biography that you made a mention out of this. Can you please tell us how Turner is handling the change management internally?
Oh boy. So honestly, I'm gonna be a little real here for a second. I really don't like that term, change management. It sort of brings out to me the notion of the heroic firefighter, right? Construction is always going to be dynamic. It's always going to be a changing environment. We're trying to rectify and organize space, against an environment, a landscape, and a business that's going to be dynamic. It's always going to be dynamic, and I think that when we start talking about, and I think I talked about this last night, when we just assume that we're going to have to be fighting a rearguard action, be fighting a retreating action against change, then we haven't really solved the problem. I like to, I want us to be, as an industry, and I want Turner to be, as a company, much more proactive about solving for dynamic situations and change issues up front. And I think this is something that we've seen as we move into the BIM environment, is that you have a lot more predictability, more predictive capability up front to solve things that historically would be worked out in the field and would create problems in the field, right? You build the building, and virtually first you're going to see a lot of the mistakes that you potentially would make in the field, and you can mitigate those. Are we going to solve everything? No, there's no silver bullet. We can't, and I talked to everyone about this, and I think I talked to Warwick about this last night. I don't think that if we got a perfect BIM model, we'd solve every change issue, right? There's these things go beyond our ability to manage the information around them. But ultimately, I think we need to change our mindset around the idea of change, such that we don't think about it as something we manage, something we proactively are solving ahead of when the shit hits the fan, so to speak.
Look, you've got this unique, I guess, bridge between architecture and construction, because you were trained as an architect, I believe?
Yes. Recovering architect is what I say when I'm talking to construction audiences, yeah.
Well, you don't wear a black skivvy, so I'm not sure if you are a real architect.
Well, you don't know that.
That's what I can't say. Okay. What do you believe is the broken bridges between architectural design and construction?
Wow.
You got 5 minutes.
I got 5 minutes. Do I have a bottle of whiskey that I can? Well, I mean, it's look, and I don't know enough about the Australian industry to speak to this, but in the States, it comes down to, and it's not just between architects and contractors, it's everyone in the supply chain, that there's, and even within our company, with different functionalities in the company, it comes down to issues of trust and reliability and predictability between the parties, right? Architects have a very different value proposition. The architects, your job is to create a design that performs to a client's specifications, and then to produce documentation, a way to document it so that I can build it. Now, I have, on my side, I've got a different set of information, different set of expectations. On Doug's side, he has a different set of information, different set of expectations. And so what happens, and I see this all the time, is, that stupid architect. That stupid architect couldn't figure out how to we've got to put 3 huge ducts in the ceiling here, and there's no room. We're going to have to lower the ceiling. Why didn't they think of that beforehand? Well, there are other things that are on the architect's mind. There's other things that you're providing value, and like the idea that we can't have empathy across these barriers between the people in the industry it really it frustrates me. I think that trying to understand what the person ahead of you is trying to accomplish and what the person on the other side of you is trying to accomplish helps you bridge that gap better. I mean, at the end of the day, the construction manager, the head contractor, we're like the dead yeast in beer. We're the least valuable person in the whole chain, because we just pass information from Shane to Doug, right? Hey, he's going to tell you to do this, and we think it kind of means this, but we don't know. So it's your liability. Go do it. right?
Thanks.
You know, so
And you have no empathy when you do that, by the way.
no, we don't. No, we never do. We beat you up. You know, like,
Yeah.
and if we're in a design build environment, we'll beat the architect up too. That's what we do, right? And that's what needs to change, right? It does not foster trust, which means that we lie to each other about schedule, about when we're going to do things, about what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, about what it's going to cost to do it, and it becomes this theater of that, you know, is all down to the fact that we don't have our incentives aligned across the delivery. We should all be thinking about what's the most important thing for the owner, for the customer, and we don't. None of us do a very good job of that at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shane, last night during the conversation, Tyler threw in a line where he said, "I can do your job better than you," I think, or something like that. And if I recall correctly, your response started with the letter F? No? No, maybe not. Do you
I
think
thought that was off the record last night. You're airing our dirty laundry, man.
It's already recorded.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true?
That he could do my job.
Do you think
better.
a contractor can do a better job in design than an
It depends
architect?
on, it depends on the scope of what you're talking about. And this is where I think there's some opportunities for gray area between the work that we do and what a contractor does and the subs and all the trades that are involved. And the issue is that, like, we are, as Tyler was saying before, we put together our documents, put together our models and our documents to serve a very particular purpose, and we have our own processes to get us to that point. There's very little overlap in those processes with the other disciplines that have to take over that information. And that ends up meaning that we kind of hand this over and we're daring you to do something with it and hope it gets built correctly or whatever. But we have an interest in seeing our vision realized in space and in form to be well put together to serve the needs of the client. Of course, we want to be profitable and deliver the work efficiently as well. But the problem is that there's this kind of really strong gap in terms of the work that we do and the processes that we have, and very little overlap with the work that he does. So I think there's absolutely an opportunity for us to actually blur a little bit more between those two. And I don't know whether it's through contractual arrangements like IPD or whatever it is, but there are opportunities for that to get better. So I would say there are parts of the process that the CMs and the trades and everybody can inform better than we as architects can, because they know more about what ultimately will happen with those items. To the same degree, I would like to see architects extend themselves further into later stages of the work to provide some level of assurance in terms of the quality of the delivery and the material that's being put together and the realization of the built work. So more and more, I think we're going to start seeing kind of a blurring of those opportunities where we have to accept that these guys actually know what they're doing, and they have to accept that we know what we're doing. And that trust, which is ultimately the issue, starts becoming a benefit.
Okay. Well, I mean, one of the suggestions yesterday, and I think it was a bit of a joke from someone, that we should have an architect into the construction company and an MEP contractor into the architecture firm and so on. So it's pretty much summarizing what you just said.
Yeah, it's also, there's a certain mindset of that comes along with each of the disciplines. It has to do with the way that you deliver your work and the process you deliver your work. And I think that creates that empathy and understanding of that process if we start looking at embedding each other in each other's disciplines. That I think we would be better at speaking the language. I think that's just kind of like a tactical move to resolve the issue. It doesn't fundamentally change the communication channels. But yeah.
Okay. You're the director of Smart Geometry?
Yes.
And actively engage in the intersection between art and technology.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more.
So it's a group that I've been involved in since about, I think, 2004, 2005. Early stages of computational design processes, so anything involved with usage of scripting language or visual programming languages to customize geometry, embed analysis processes, customize the method in which you gear fabrication. The idea, at least in the early stages, was to say, we're exploring form throughout the design process, but we want to start integrating live analysis as well as even the method of fabrication into this model, such that every time we're developing these things, we're getting adaptive responses and analysis and products in the end. So the group started back then to explore that as a process, and it exists as a nonprofit and internationally runs conferences and workshops around the globe. We're probably going to have one coming up in the spring in Toronto as well. But so I've had a tremendous opportunity through a group like that to work with my colleagues and competitors to talk about the use of algorithms and data design, and work with mathematicians and artists.
Is that helping attract young talent?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think the way I've always seen that group is as a good intersection between practice, academia, and industry. And by showing that practices are interested in these techniques, which is something, for a lot of the younger students is quite sexy to see, to work, to do the work when they're in university like this, but to see how it actually gets applied to real built architecture, not just, things that look fun on the screen or in a VR environment, but something that's actually large and occupiable and buildable and was built on budget and performs. That absolutely benefits the kind of recruiting process.
Okay. Do you believe that all the mandates and standardization that we're striving to hinders creativity?
Not the standards themselves. I think to some extent the obsession over the standards can. I think it, and you're jumping into a small part of what I'll talk about tomorrow morning. I think there is too strong of an obsession over some of that development that we're missing some of the other opportunities that we get through the use of technology and design. I think there's additional conversations that are not being had in how technology informs design because we're spending a lot of time talking about standards. I'd love for it just to get over with and people move on and get their work done. I do think there is absolutely a benefit though in standards providing a foundation so we can stop talking about that level of the work, the interoperability, the file formats, the naming of these types of conventions. I'd like all that to just get done with. So for me, the frustration is the obsession over the fact that we are still seemingly inventing this. And I think when it finally does get done, if it ever gets done, I hope it does, we can move beyond that.
Right, there's a difference between standards and standard work. And I think what I'd like to see, again, the standards are one thing that you need sort of in order to have a robust way to analyze and compute on data. There has to be some level of standardization. But I think what you're talking about too is standard work, like getting to the point where that you don't have to think about that aspect of it anymore. Like, one of the interesting things when you look at technologies, some of the emerging technologies out there is that what they're doing. I'm trying to think of a good example right now, but you take away, you make procedural all of the stuff that's happening at that layer. Like, who in this room? I expect to see no hands on this one. Who in this room wants to put together a door and hardware schedule tomorrow, right? And on a set of drawings, right? Who wants to do? No one wants to do that. No, like literally, I can't. If there's a human being that wants to put together a door and hardware schedule, I want to meet them because they're going to be the weirdest person I've ever met in my life, right? They're probably are actuaries instead. They work in the insurance industry, but. Why spend any time worrying about that stuff? And let's make it procedural. Let's make it just something that just happens as a matter of, you put a duct and all that stuff populates and it works together. And then you can get to the real meat of what you do, which is providing the value you provide. And all the other stuff, customer doesn't care about that.
Door schedule is a waste of your brain power.
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
Other things you could be doing, and there's absolutely correct. If there's an opportunity to standardize that process, and I think we within with Bagot and with a lot of other architecture firms, there's always an interest in looking for those moments where you can say, you know what, that's not worth us having a debate about. Let's just standardize that, put together that airline flight manual that check mail says do this, this, and this, and move on, and then I can have my brain on something a lot more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Cesare, welcome to Australia.
Thank you.
You're a MAP BIM expert with 10 years experience or more. You're studying engineering management, I believe. You believe that the most important part of the BIM puzzle to be the 3 C's. Can you please tell us what the 3 C's are and why?
Actually, I think that the most important are the collaboration, and the most important C in that 3 C is the collaboration, and the collaboration between the contractors and the consultant. Because before joining COWI, I was in the contractor side, and one of the biggest concern that I found when I joined COWI, which is a consultant firm, is that most of the time during the design process, you don't have anything in mind about how these things will be constructed. So when I was in Qatar, working for the Qatari Metro, we were working with one of the biggest consultants in the world. I would not mention the consultant, but we received a couple of models, clash-free, which is perfect because the employment requirement is asking for the clash-free model, but they were completely unconstructable. So we had, I'm from Italy, so I like spaghetti, I like pasta, but that piping were really spaghetti piping. And we have, as a contractor, we were placing air vent everywhere just to be sure to maintain that clash-free. And then we realized with the main contractor saying that, okay, we have to rebuild this model just to be sure that this can be constructable. So the collaboration between the main contractors and the consultant with the idea that the model should be constructed anytime, it's for me the most important. This is what I'm trying to bring now in a consultant firm like COWI. And I think this is the most important part, that all the consultants. So you almost answered my question to this question, because you are saying that you need an architect in a contractor and you need an engineer probably inside an architectural firm. So this is the biggest one in the sea, and honestly, I don't remember the other two.
I can tell you because they're written. Thank you.
Thank you.
Malcolm, welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. Zuuse supports owners and operators of assets to drive greater control, especially during the facility management stages. Mm-hmm. In your experience with owner and operators, and probably there's not too many of them, if any, here, is there any owner operators of any assets in the room? One?
Can I speak to you later, please?
Congratulations, it's a good start that we have one, and I'm serious about that because we do miss them, and at the end of the day, they really need to take some initiative, I guess, and responsibility to drive the demand, down to the earlier stages of the design. From your experience with Zuuse, do you believe that they are actually engaged enough, the owners and operators engaged enough at the early design and construction phase to make sure that the life cycle of the asset is a success ultimately?
Look, our experience is that they need guidance in how to do that, how to engage. What are the actual issues that they need to be engaging with and talking about? So, look, speaking as a software company that needs to make sales to keep us all working, if you like, we've learned when we started in the business and the different parties and stakeholders we talk to, we very quickly learned that it is the asset owner that we need to be targeting. It's because, at the end of the day, they drive the change because they're the ones that really specify the outcome. So we clearly targeted them, and it's almost as simple as saying, well, look, this is what you can have. If this is what you want, then you've got to drive the change to deliver that outcome. Now, the first few projects we worked on, I'll be honest, we didn't know ourselves. Some of the aspects that we had to sort of tackle and the challenges, non-modeled objects, clearly identifying assets, understanding what they are. We sort of had to learn it on the job. And of course, 4 years in now, we're much better placed to be able to say, answer the argument where people say, well, how do we classify our assets? Do we use Omniclass? Do we use Uniformat? Do we use... Actually, as a software guy, I don't actually mind. I just need you to be consistent, apply a rule, and then stick with that rule and enforce that rule. Because once you put that in, and you tell me what a 21.28.26.58 is, then I can use that. And I can say, I've got a document here, and it's a user manual for pumps, and I can go off and link those to all of the pumps in the model supplied by a particular discipline. So the answer to that is understanding what the asset owner wants, and then leading them along the path and getting their engagement. Often it's as simple as, look, do you have an asset ID format that you want to use moving forward? Is it 3 letters and then 2 numbers or whatever it is? And it's taking that and making sure that becomes part of the model, making sure that becomes encoded in the model. We just look for consistency, so we don't actually mind how that's done. We understand the concepts of what we need, and that's what we really sort of concentrate in leading them along that path.
My personal experience is that you should be involved from the first stages as well, because again, in the Qatari project, we had lots of trouble at the end of the project when we should hand over our model, because the company working on the facility management system, and it's exactly the same, is the same idea. They asked for different codes at the end because they couldn't manage to do this kind of transformation of information, our codes from the design phase to the handover phase. So in my opinion, you should be involved in the very early stages to drive also these codes since the beginning.
I remember we worked on a $120 million building in the education, and I remember 5 solid days of having to retrofit in asset IDs and classifying, and it was just, it was a horrible 5 days. But, we had to do it in those days because it wasn't going to get done for us. We hadn't got involved early enough, and to give the outcome, we had to sort of swallow it. But look, happily, we're seeing a shift, and just to sort of add to the asset owner argument, there's also the government. So just last week, I was with the Queensland government, who are making drives now to establish sort of protocols about the use of BIM. They're fairly slow moving. They're targeting 2023 as when they can start to implement some of the guidelines and rules that they want around BIM. But certainly it was a great session, and it wasn't dissimilar to the session I gave here in trying to understand what it requires in BIM and FM, which should be a major factor. So we know what's happened in the UK, where the government have driven that and the results that's had. So that's another area for us, the government side, pushing them to deliver on standards and so on, which is getting traction.
Thank you, Malcolm. I'm going to ask Doug one more question. I'm not going to do another round, by the way, everyone. I know you're anxious to start the drinks. Doug, you're a committee member of many organizations. The one that I want to refer to is WSU's Imagine Tomorrow High School Student Competition. Okay. So my question in relation to this, in your opinion, what do we need to do to attract young talent and keep them? I know Shane sort of touched on this, but can I get that from your own point of view?
Yeah, so the cliff note on this competition, Washington State University advertises to all of the high schools across Washington State, and they start advertising in the fall. And they encourage form teams, come compete, and they try to get 500 high school students on their campus in the spring around their idea to save the planet. And it's amazing to see the energy that these young students have around saving the planet as a theme. And in that it can be transportation, or it can be a social conscience idea, it can be behavioral or whatever. But when you go there and you link the built environment is a way to help save the planet, all of a sudden their eyes light up and say, wow, I could work in that kind of a space. But I heard it's construction. They don't want anything to do with construction, but they want to save the planet, and they want to do it with technology, and it's fine that they'll do it in buildings if it's related to energy or materials. So I think we just have to link up with where their passion is, and we need solved in the built environment exactly what they want to do, but they don't understand the language that we talk about in the built environment, and they think it's hammers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good point, thank you. I'm going to finish off by asking 2 volunteers, only 2 out of you 4 gentlemen, so anyone can volunteer. You obviously had a fairly long career, 10 years at least or more. If you had to change something in your own career, whether it's construction, MAP, or software, or architecture, what would you change?
Well, I'd be in charge. Like that, isn't that what we all want, right? We all have ideas about how we want to change the industry. So, I'd want to be sitting in Doug's seat, running the company, making those decisions. And of course, obviously, the grass is greener for everyone, right? I don't have the same risks and weight on my mind that someone who sits in the president's chair, CEO's chair, does. But I think we all, like if I had to change anything, I'd want to be, directly, responsible for the entire hierarchy of my company, so that I could fire the people that need to be fired.
Okay.
I'm gonna take a slightly different angle for this, because and this is hit upon a bit by Doug. I know Tyler's going to talk a little bit about it, and I'll talk a little bit about it as well. We're seeing a lot of encroachment from adjacent industries that are increasingly interested in what we do in the built environment. And they come from different kinds of backgrounds, business backgrounds, software development backgrounds, that have very different business models, very different approaches to the work that they do. And I'm super proud of being trained as an architect, because there's a certain design thinking approach that I think is quite unique. That's part of why these other disciplines around there are so interested, or other industries are interested in it. But I actually feel like I would like to have augmented my experiences the last 10 years with not dabbling, but actually going both feet into one of those other industries a while ago, so that by the time I get to this point, it's not that I have knowledge of that, not that I've done a little bit of dabbling on the side, but I actually have synthesized that sort of understanding and bring that exact same business model, that same innovation drive, those types of things back into the work that I do as well. For me, I kind of feel like in my early 40s, I'm playing a little bit of catch up in some of that area. I have experience in computation and software development, a little bits of that stuff, but I think I would have jumped into it a little bit more than I have, instead of as kind of a side project.
Okay, great.
I think it's really, really important, right? That you start to see is, get to, I've been in this industry for 20 years now, and it's crazy that I've been here this long, but you start to see sort of systems of how work happens and how business happens that repeat themselves, and to be able to see, that the same problems manifest in the software industry, that manifest in construction, and we all it all comes back to at the end of the day, it's the human psychology that drives how business operates, and to be able to see that from a number of different perspectives, to see that it's, everyone's muddling along is a really valuable thing for people.
Well, gents, thank you very much for your time and sharing your experience with the group. Thank you very much.